Moments of Truth with Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Mike Redbord, former senior executive of HubSpot. Mike, you grew with HubSpot from when it was a baby to a public company over 10 years, and you were responsible for customer success and renewals for a good chunk of that, and also building and launching product lines for customer success. So I would love for you to spend a little bit of time talking about your experience at HubSpot, and then tell us what you've been up to since you left.
Yeah, Andrew, it's absolutely my pleasure to join today. Hi to all the listeners. I hope this is a really interesting episode for you too. So I started at HubSpot when it was, a pretty small company. It was about 100, 150 people, something like that, which nowadays at over 3,000, that makes it seem really small. And I think like a lot of people that get into customer success, which I now consider myself a customer success professional, I really didn't. 10 years ago, more toward the beginning of my career, I took a job because I needed a job, and that job happened to be with working with customers, and I was pretty good at that. So I just did it. And I started at HubSpot really doing onboarding with our customers, which is what we needed a lot of. We were growing really quickly, and I spent years doing that. I loved it, loved working on the phone with our customers, helping them be successful. Eventually, company grew. I started doing more scalable onboarding, what now is called tech touch onboarding. Back in 2012, we did it a little differently. I eventually ran our support team. And then, as Andrew was saying, the whole global customer success team for HubSpot, inclusive of standing up the renewals team and operationalizing all that. Then I had the distinct pleasure of building and launching the Service Hub product for HubSpot, which is all about customer success. So I've really seen customer success from a bunch of different angles. That story at HubSpot spans a company that grew from really small to a national powerhouse to an international juggernaut. So I've seen a lot of different stages of that growth. And, I feel like that experience there really took me through 4 or 5 very distinct chapters of what it's like to run CS at a company. So I'm super thankful for that experience. Nowadays, I really advise, I consult, I invest, I try to help. I consider myself a helper on a good day. And I hope that this podcast helps you guys.
I'm sure it will. Just hearing about that experience in itself gives people hope about their careers, right? You went from individual contributor doing the very repetitive, very tactical, but yet very important job of getting people onboarded to, running the entire organization and building out service offerings. I mean, you've got that very well-rounded career experience. So
yeah, it was an absolute blast too. I will say
that's great.
That journey was a really special one for me.
Yeah, those are fun. I've had a couple of those, and they really leave an impact. So renewal, retention, and operations is definitely something that's well within your wheelhouse. And when we were prepping for this conversation, we were talking about that, and how you go about, what kind of strategies you can apply when you're dealing with those elements of your business, and most importantly your customers, in a moment of crisis like what we're going through right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it'd be really interesting to explore some of your thoughts, best practices, opinions on how to approach that, how to deal with that.
Yeah, I think what we're going through right now is it's incredibly challenging in a number of kind of exogenous, uncertain, and dangerous ways. It impacts all of us differently, right? I think when it comes to thinking about your subscription business and your renewals and your customers, it forces a couple of things. The current crisis does. It forces you to have really good fundamentals, and we can talk about what that means. And it forces you to have a pretty kind of detailed execution strategy of how you're actually going to navigate this on a per customer basis. So the first one of those is kind of how do we organize for success? And the second one is, all right, once I'm actually in it with the customer, how are we going to make this work? And you need to have a more caring, I think, helpful approach to deal making nowadays. And I think a lot of those fundamentals, though, are not super different from what they are outside of a crisis situation. So when you're kind of trying to set up a renewal operation for the first time, like I did at HubSpot, for instance, the very first thing that I learned through that experience was that the absolute key to your success in this moment in setting up the renewal operation is going to be visibility. You can't win at what you can't see. And if you get surprised in a renewal, either on working with one customer, or you get surprised in your operation where a really big renewal comes up this week and you didn't expect it, that's no good. So really the key and one of the core values of setting up yourself for success in the operation is visibility. So what's that really mean in practice? What does that look like? It can be as simple as a spreadsheet. In fact, we had a spreadsheet. It often went on a clipboard and was walked around from desk to desk in the early days, right? So go back to what makes sense to you, what works for your culture and works for the way that you operate. But it can really just be a spreadsheet that has all of the lists of renewals that you're going to have this month, next month, the month after, the month after, the month after. And as far as you have visibility, it probably makes sense to do it out, for about 6 months. If you're in an industry that is really seriously affected by this current crisis, perhaps even longer, just so you have revenue visibility out farther. But that visibility is at the core of everything that you need to do in order to run a successful renewal operation in this crisis or outside of it.
Yeah, you can't manage what you don't see, right? And that's a big, yeah, I get it. That's a great suggestion.
And it's specifically nefarious somehow with our contracts, right? Because especially if you're a newer company, maybe you changed your MSA a few times and your contracts are in a kind of, I don't know, let's just call them squirrely state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the data is in this system, some of the data is in that system, some of the data is on paper, some of the paper fell behind the filing cabinet, right? You need to actually get your arms around all this stuff and get it all in one place where you have complete 100% visibility into what's going on. That is really the first step.
Yep.
The second step then is to, once you have that, things start to get a little bit easier. Honestly, the first challenge is often getting the data organized.
Yeah, just wrangling the data.
It can take a long time and be hard. Don't beat yourself up. It's not perfect, but try to get it right. The second thing you need to do then is get a sense for what I like to call the shape of the renewal pipeline. So when you are sitting here, and if it's May, say, and you're in May, there's probably not a ton you can do about the renewals that are coming up in May. You can certainly get in there and try to negotiate and do all the hand-to-hand stuff, but really a successful renewal is made by working well in ahead of the renewal and working 90 or 120 days in advance. So what you need to do is get a shape of your renewals out. Get your May cohort, get your June cohort, July, August, and take a look at those months. Ask yourself and do the math on it. How much renewal revenue is in each one of those months? Oh, we have X amount in May and we have 1.5 that in June, but wow, July, for whatever reason, last year we had a huge July and it's going to be 3X. And so your ability to be successful in those 3 months is really determined by July more than June and May. You need to know the shape of your renewals and where the lumpiness is. That's the second step.
Right. So you're putting focus on your July folks now.
Yeah.
You're starting to focus on them now.
Yep.
Not throw away the other two that, the May and June, of course, but you really need to freaking nail July.
Yeah, you just know that your success or failure as a business is going to be determined by July.
Yeah.
And then what you should do is really unpack July. Like, wow, July is going to be a big month. All right, what's going on in here? Take a look at your list. Is the fact that July is a big month driven by one giant renewal? Is it driven by a bunch of smaller ones? Mm-hmm. Is it driven by a kind of barbell shape where there's some small ones, but a few big ones, right? And that should inform your strategy. And then, of course, how are those accounts distributed across your team, right? Are they all owned by one CSM or one renewals person, or are they all owned, by a bunch of different folks? And it's going to be a bit of a different kind of wrangling. And so when it can identify which months are going to be the really key months to your success, you can then break them apart into the really specific bits and bobs that comprise those months. And if you do kind of figure out that, oh, this month's going to be really big and all these deals are spread out, and for some reason it actually makes sense to reassign some of those deals in advance, you actually now have time and a little bit of breathing room to set your team and your organization up for success. If perhaps you want one person to really focus on just those renewals in July and get that really right, you could, with 90, 120 days in advance, reorganize, set yourself up for better leverage into that month.
Right. Okay. And so, okay, so now we've of course identified what we need to focus on. And I would hope that in companies that are more mature, likely have got their hands around this. The interactions with the customers, are going to be, and you touched on it before, are going to be very different.
Yeah,
right? What what you lead with and how you incorporate the whole renewals piece into that, and then how do you address what I think a lot of people are starting to see right now, which is I can't commit, or I got budget constraints or what have you.
totally. Yeah. So one comment on what folks are seeing right now is there's a pretty big difference between a customer who calls you up mid-contract and says, look, my business is on fire. I need some help. I need to get out of the deal that I made with you, than a renewal that's coming up and sort of is a time-based thing.
Right.
Those
Okay.
former ones, I think that's a kind of a different motion.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, these kind of time-based renewals is you're just managing the cohorts that are coming up anyway.
Right.
You know they're going to be more difficult conversations. How do you set yourself up for success?
Exactly. That's what yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that let's talk about what you can get on a unit of one after you get the visibility on the whole thing, how to succeed at the unit of one. So you have a renewal coming up a few months out, say it's 90 days out. The first thing you should be doing with that customer is, as soon as you possibly can, like from the 90-day mark, when they show up on your radar, the first thing you do is you do not call the customer up. You do not send them an email. The first thing you do is you huddle internally and you understand what the state of that customer is. So look at your usage data. Look at your financial data. Are they on monthly billing? Have they had trouble paying their bills? Are they a chronic late bill payer, or is this just a current thing? Right? Look at the nature of the engagement. Have they been working with your support team? Have they been working with your CS team? What was the timing of the last proactive engagement, the last reactive engagement? Get kind of the 360 picture of what's going on.
Do your homework.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And put together a dossier, like, get a little kind of stalkerish in your customers. These are not going to be easy conversations. So you have all that data in your systems, your usage data, your financial data, and your engagement data. Go on LinkedIn. Do they have a COVID-19 response? Have they done a layoff, right? Try to understand what you're really up against, what the CEO is struggling with right now, so you can have a kind of the broadest, most in-depth version of the story for this customer. Normally, that's a good practice. Today, I think it's necessary.
It's
if you're
critical.
Not doing that, you're not set up for success. And you know
Yeah.
what? Somebody else who's also got a renewal with that same customer is doing that work, and you're going to lose out on the dollars, and they're not.
Yeah, exactly. Because the wallet is shrinking, right? So we want to do our damn best so we can get our share of it, right?
Yeah. Every CFO on the planet has a spreadsheet right now of all of their recurring expenses, and they want the sum of those things to be lower. So there's going to be winners and losers.
Yeah.
Your ability to succeed is going to be based on your ability to form a really good hypothesis on what that customer needs and then actually execute on it. So you start way in advance, 90 days or 120 days in advance. You do your homework, you get the 360. Cool. Now, if you think that account has a lot of like health issues and you're looking at this and you're like, oh boy, this is going to be troublesome, right? You actually have enough time, maybe the next, 3 to 4 weeks, to try to remediate them and get them into a better place. If they're seeing value issues, you can go after that because you have enough time that maybe the renewal isn't even yet on their radar and you're actually a step ahead. You can then be kind of, just one step ahead of your customer the entire way through this. That's the ideal situation if you see there are problems. If you see it's things are really good and you're like, yeah, this is going to be smooth sailing, right? Don't get too confident, but you can kind of label that, bright green, the traffic light scale, and maybe the one that's got kind of some value issues is yellow. And then there's some that are probably walking dead, and they're in an industry that is incredibly impacted, or for whatever reason, it's going to be super difficult for you to renew. You want to mark those red. Then once you kind of got like the sense of what this one customer, we're now 90 days out, is it red, yellow, green? If it's red, you need to really ask yourself, is this worth my time? Or do I have other customers that I can get better revenue leverage out of my own time by working with? Yeah. Do you want to kind of try to raise the dead, or do you want to try to, work with folks that are going to have a chance?
Yeah, not right now. Not right now. I mean, yeah, you never want to give up, but you got to pick and choose your battle and your focus, especially right now.
You got to pick and choose. And when it's going to take 3 times as much effort to earn one renewal, you're going to need to invest your time very, very wisely. And I think the winners and the losers on a kind of company basis over the next 6 months are those that can make really wise decisions about how to spend their time CS wise and renewal wise. So if say they're in kind of they're in a pretty good state, right? Now we're moving from 90 days in, the clock is ticking, we're moving up closer and closer to renewal. It's 60 days. If they're in a good place, perhaps you start with a really well-crafted email that takes some of your detective work, right, and combines it with some critical information around, what's your renewal date, what are your renewal terms, if you, when do we want to get this deal done, if perhaps you have a buffer back from your cancellation date, cancellation deadline of 2 weeks or whatever it is, and you want to actually start that engagement. So you start the engagement well after you start your detective work. That's really, really key. And then once you get into that engagement, there's a number of different ways to think about making sure that this goes well. I think if you've done your homework, you're coming in with a hypothesis of if they're going to renew kind of business as usual, if even perhaps they're an upgrade or a cross-sell opportunity, or if you're going to have trouble. And I think a lot of companies are kind of thinking carefully about okay, what if we're going to have trouble part of this? And I think that's well worth a discussion about some of the really kind of detailed tactics and how to make sure that those yellow accounts or those kind of even orange accounts closer to red, you can have a strategy for success about.
That makes sense.
So if we talk about once you actually get into it and you're working with a customer who's saying, look, this isn't working for me. My business is falling apart. I'm trying to cut costs, all this. I think there's a bunch of different ways to think about this. Honestly, one of the most successful strategies that I've seen, inclusive of the 2008 crisis, was companies that have lots of products saying to their customer, okay, look, I know what you're going through. I get you. You have one product from us. We sell 6. We will give you the other 5 for free for the next year if you renew on that one. What does that do? That preserves revenue.
Right.
That gives them a ton of free value.
Right.
And it ensures that your contract isn't the one that is canceled. It's the other 5 vendors that are canceled.
Right.
Companies that have lots of products can do this. And it's a hugely successful strategy saying, look, I know what you're doing, but you're going to cancel everybody else, not me. We're not going to be the one that you cancel.
I love that. Oh, that's a great strategy. What else?
I think that's number one, if you can actually do that.
I know. If you have a broad product base, though, right? Like you said.
Yeah. If you're a little smaller and you don't have that opportunity, okay, maybe through partnership or something you can manufacture it, but probably not. So you kind of have fewer tools to play with. You try to get the business as usual renewal. It's not coming up. They're just pushing back really hard. You're in a tussle with the CFO and you're trying to make it work. The strategy here for businesses that want to preserve as much revenue and kind of come out of this crisis as strong as possible is to think about how do we create a cascading kind of system of offers that the last of which is cancellation, but has a number of kind of incremental value steps or incremental pricing steps downwards. So an example of giving away free product, that's not something you usually do, but it's a great first step kind of in that cascade. The second might be, okay, look, we're going to cut you a big discount. We're going to give you like 50% off, but you're going to sign up with us for 3 years. So it's about changing your terms, either your commitment terms in terms of contract length, so that you have deferred revenue off into the future.
Right.
Or if you're hungry for cash and the business you're working with for some reason isn't, perhaps you can affect payment terms and say, look, we're going to cut you a 50% discount. Just pay up front. I know.
Pay up front. Exactly. I need the cash in the bank now.
Yeah. So that's next one is terms in the cascade. Third then is just sort of straight up discount, which you can combine with terms. Say, look, usually it'd be annual. We want you to go to a quarterly contract and we're going to cut you a discount, sort of move the terms the other way along with the discount. And then fourth is something that a lot of companies would quote unquote never do, but here we are. And it involves, furloughing payments or doing some accrual payment. So saying, look, you pay us $500 a month. Usually that would be $6,000 a year. We require payment up front. What we're going to do here is actually not going to require any payment for the rest of the year. You're going to pay us on January 1st, and you're going to pay us an accrual basis of what you would have had. That really works for a business that's concerned about getting through the crisis, and then is pretty confident they're going to have cash in hand afterwards. And it can be a really nice kind of way to say, look, this is very unusual, but we want to do this for you. It's a give-get situation. Right,
and that way you don't lose them from the platform. You don't lose them. They don't walk away. And then I guess the final strategy would be, once again, don't lose them. Say, okay, we'll put you on hiatus, right?
Yeah.
We'll keep your stuff there. We're just going to pause you.
Yep.
And then let's visit this in 3 months and see where we're both, where you're at.
Yeah.
Right?
And even below that on the cascade is like, look, you say to the customer, our relationship is incredibly valuable. We want to be with you through thick and thin. This is thin, but we're actually going to provide you our software for free. So sign an annual contract, the first 6 months of which are free, the first 3 months of which are free,
Right. Sign
as
an
a
annual
negotiation.
contract and we won't bill you for 6 months.
Yeah. And I think it's really different on a per customer basis and on a per business basis. And I think that's why doing your homework up front, 90 days in advance, is so important. If you don't walk into the renewal with a strong hypothesis and sort of cascading decision tree in your own head about where this is going to go, it's not going to go well for you because you're just not prepared for the environment that you're walking into.
Yeah.
You're just going to end up at the bottom of that cascade, swept all the way downriver. And you're going to end up with a lot more cancellations than maybe you needed to. And by the way, your customers are not going to remember you as the business that helped, the business that cared during this crisis. They're going to remember you as the business they got rid of.
Right. Yeah. No, I get it. That's great. That makes some solid strategies for sure.
Yeah.
We're employing some of those ourselves.
Yeah, I think that doing this on the drop of a dime is actually exceptionally hard. That's why when I was talking about kind of the operational approach, I said throw out the fancy tools, use a clipboard and a spreadsheet. When I'm talking about renewal strategies, I think it's like put a Google Doc together, like use scrappy tools back like when you were a 10-person startup to get through this. Expecting to implement a renewal strategy like that with the appropriate policies and governance in a system right now is going to be even harder. Right?
Yeah. Google Sheets, right?
Google Sheets, Google Docs,
Sheets, Google Docs. Do it simple.
And daily pipeline review meetings, and then daily film review meetings, right? If you can record some of these renewal calls and use the good and the bad to educate the team, and you can help hold a film review over lunch, over Zoom every day, where you can listen to, 2 renewal calls or talk about one customer that you did your detective work on. That sharing of knowledge amongst your team, even if you're in a virtual setting, I think is really invaluable to just getting enough at-bats to get this right fast so that you can start experiencing success, at the beginning of this crisis, not the end.
I was going to say, given that it's everybody's virtual now, I think it also has the side benefit of getting people together, even albeit virtually a couple of times a day, so you can maintain some of that office and group camaraderie and
totally.
So now I've been hearing though that some companies are talking about repurposing their new sales folks to focus on the existing customer base, and I would think that could cause a lot of unneeded strain and friction with the customers, but also the existing customer success team as well. What have you heard on that?
Yeah, so I've heard of a number of companies doing this, and I actually think it's a pretty reasonable way to sort of make your way through this crisis, is to, if you have to sort of move folks around in the organization and your salespeople are telling you, look, I'm not getting any new leads. Nobody's filling out forms on the website. Nobody's responding to my emails and my in-mails. As a CEO, you say, all right, well, I have the sales talent. What do I do? And you perhaps work with your best leads, which are your customers. So I actually have a lot of empathy and respect for this strategy. I think making it work, to your point, Andrew, is really hard because now it's a little oil and water, right?
Right.
Sales always have a relationship. The relationship naturally has some friction, and now you're just trying to smush them together, right? So certainly with the CS team, it can be tricky. And then with customers too, a customer doesn't want to be in the middle of a renewal negotiation like we were talking about, maybe really far down that cascade, and get a cold call from a sales rep saying, want to buy my new product. So there's a lot that you need to think about in order to make this work. I think there are probably 2 or 3 principles that we could offer to listeners here that would help them just set up the basics of the structure so that folks can play together on the same field in the customer base. So as an example of...
well, I was going to say, you got to be, at the end of the day, we also need to do our best to serve our customers and to make sure that we're still there to serve our customers, right? So, while it could be a slippery slope, I totally understand and agree with you that it's an interesting strategy. You just got to do it right.
Yeah.
Right. Because we want to keep the team as whole as possible so we can get through this. And we need to be able to support our customers, but it's
Yeah.
yeah, you got to be really careful.
Yeah, and I think, when you think about extreme, managerial decisions like this, or like doing a reduction in force or something, these are the most challenging moments of management. But at the
Yeah,
end of the day, a business that isn't in business can't help its customers. It can't help its
exactly.
shareholders. It can't achieve its vision to change the world. And so, everybody getting on board and, trying to make it work, I think is really, really important to being able to survive.
Well, and you got to lead with that, right? You got to lead with that as a leader. You got to lead with that and say, we all need to get on board with this. I mean, that's the first step, but you also need to make sure that, and I'm sure you have some. Do you have some recommendations, some strategies on how sales, needs
Yeah.
to approach it?
Totally. So I think that a lot of times when people well outside the customer success operation think about selling to customers, they actually look to the renewal and they say, "Oh, the renewal. That's the moment when the upsell happens." And I think that's actually a reasonable conclusion if you're not paying super close attention to the customer lifecycle like a lot of CSMs are,
Right.
because that's when the cash register rings, right? You
Exactly.
re-sign the contract, that's when the upsell happens. But if we think about the genesis of that cash register ring,
Right.
like the renewal, it starts well in advance. And,
Right.
the kind of desire creation and the realization that the vendor can do more for you as a
Yeah.
customer, all of this takes place well in advance. So I think that the first thing you want to think about when selling more to your customers in this crisis or otherwise is understanding that if you swoop in as a salesperson and you place a cold call like 2 weeks before that renewal, not only are you unlikely to close the sale, you are likely to screw up a bunch of stuff in flight, because with
Yeah.
customers, it's not like a lead that you disqualify. You can't have any broken eggs. So
Right.
if you're a salesperson do that, it's not going to work. So the salespeople need to understand, and it's probably reasonable to put some kind of guardrails or guidance in place that sales folks should avoid certain periods of the life cycle that might look really appealing. As an example, the month before renewal, like salespeople just don't work in there unless you're invited in by a CS person, or the month after they close, right? It's like, hey, I just bought, I don't even have value at the first thing, right? So
Right.
create kind of what I like to call a stoplight system, where sometimes it's red 30 days before the renewal date, sometimes it's red 30 days for onboarding. Sometimes it's red if they have a really bad health score or something's occurred in their account. You could get more sophisticated with this, but create a way that salespeople know when they're going to step in a pothole. They don't want to do it. They're not trying to hurt you or hurt your customer. But if they don't know and you're not telling them when not to go in there, they're not going to know any better. That's step
Exactly.
one.
Yeah.
Just like you want to create the, hey, salesperson, there's a pothole here, don't step in it. You want to be able to tell your salespeople when there's a great opportunity, right? And so just like you want to have the red stuff, you want to have the green stuff and all the good things when salespeople are, told, look, this is an awesome account, awesome opportunity. I think a really kind of smooth way to do this for CS folks is to be able to basically create a CS qualified lead, a CSQL, if you will,
I like it.
where there's some way, and it could be just a checkbox in your CRM. It could literally be sending an email to your sales rep. Remember, Scrappy can be good in times like this. When you say, hey, I was talking to this customer and they're looking for help with this thing. We do this thing, but they don't have the product that does this thing. And so if your sales reps are really responsible for the upsell, how can your CS folks feed your salespeople the qualified leads for the customers that you actually want them to talk to, invite the salesperson in, broker the intro via email as a CSM? Love that, because that's just
Oh yeah.
it's like the solution to your problem is just buying more stuff from us. And actually we have a tool in our tool belt. It's a salesperson who can do that. So you have this kind of traffic light system,
Yep.
the no-go zones, avoid the potholes, and then these CSQLs, customer service or customer success qualified leads. We're really inviting sales folks in. And then I think, salespeople are naturally hungry and they're motivated by activity and success that comes from that activity. And so the rest of it, you have to think about a way that salespeople can engage with your customers across the life cycle when they're not invited in, not in the no-go zones, not in the red zones, but in places where, it's sort of business as usual. And I think to do that, you want to create some enablement for your sales folks. Like, here's the type of email that would be appropriate to send. Here's the type of sequence, maybe of 3 or 4 emails that would be appropriate to send. Here's what's not appropriate to send that you might send to a prospect. For instance, the breakup email at the end of a basho sequence, probably not the right thing to send to a customer, might be the right thing to send to a prospect. And I think if you work on the enablement and share wins across CS and sales when trying to sell back into your customer base, pretty quickly after a week or two, you'll start to find some patterns of what works and what doesn't, and you'll come up with the best practices for your business of how to work that middle zone of where your salesperson doesn't have an obvious lead, it's not a no-go zone, it's just sort of business as usual.
Makes sense.
Yeah. If you can
could also you could also get your salespeople some customer success training as well, if you happen to subscribe to some sort of training program or something like that.
It's actually a really good point, Andrew, in 2 ways. One is salespeople understanding the skill set the CS people have will lead to better collaboration.
Yeah.
And so taking trainings, shadowing CS people is really good.
Yeah.
And then 2, there's CS training in a general sense, which I think more of the world could use. And there's also CS training in a kind of detailed sense of like, hey, salesperson, at our company, this is actually what the customer lifecycle looks like. I know we told you onboarding takes 30 days. That was a lie. It's 90, right? And you sort of pull off some of the veneer that you had before and just get brutally honest with each other to get the results today. Yeah.
So it's a strategy that you got to be very careful about how you implement it. But getting sales involved in this when we come out of this could result in a much better collaboration between sales and the post-sales team. Yeah, we saw the freaking dogs and cats living together in harmony, right? Yeah. It's just solving all the problems here on Moments of Truth.
That would be a terrific silver lining. I mean, I've tried hard just from a personal mental health standpoint to find the silver linings in this, and I think there's a lot of stuff going on at businesses that is really hard for everybody. And if one of the ways that we can come out of this is we improve some of the relations between the two sides of the fence of sales and CS, man, that would be a great thing.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you for spending some time with me today. It's a great conversation. I really enjoy it. I enjoy our conversations. We definitely need to do this again.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Listeners, thanks for making it through to the end. Hope this was useful. Happy to clarify anything you want. I'm a natural marketer by trade, so Twitter, LinkedIn, come find me. Thanks for listening.